And we're back. It's First Friday. And what does that mean, everybody? That means Daniel Malloy's back, news reporter from Detroit Catholic, filling us in on all the wonderful stories they are covering in the Archdiocese of Detroit. Happy good First Friday here, Daniel.
Happy First Friday, Vanessa. Happy Feast of St. Sixtus and Companions.
Yes, and wonderful feast day, and we're happy to be here with you today. And so let's get started because there's a lot to talk with you about here, a lot you guys have been covering. National Shrine of the Little Flower Basilica celebrates 100 years of faith. What a beautiful basilica if you've never been there in Royal Oak.
Yeah, absolutely. We started the month celebrating 100 years of National Shrine of the Little Flower Basilica, right there on the corner of 12 Mile and Woodward. You really cannot miss it. And just delving into the wonderful history of that parish, the first parish in the United States named after the Little Flower herself, St. Therese of Lisieux. And it was a great chance to really speak with all the people at the Basilica staff about what they've been doing for this past 12 months and the thousands upon thousands of pilgrims that have come to the Basilica. And everyone is just amazed by the architecture and just what they see in this really holy ground.
It's a beautiful basilica. It's huge, and it's so styled differently than a typical church. What was what was new for you guys as you were writing this, Daniel? You penned this. Anything that you learned about the basilica, the shrine, that you did not know?
So one thing that I did know, and I didn't really make in the story because it didn't flow, but the next time you or your listeners are at National Shrine of the Little Flower, there is a symbol for all 50 states somewhere etched on either the facade or inside the basilica. Because it is a national basilica, and you can kind of see these little nooks and crevices when you go there. So that was a cool little tidbit that I didn't even know, and I've been to the basilica many a time. The other one that I really noticed was just kind of the imagery of different saints, obviously St. Therese of Lisieux, but other saints and their symbols kind of hidden throughout the basilica. So I encourage your listeners, next time you're at National Shrine of the Little Flower, obviously pay attention to Mass, but after Mass, just stay a while and linger and just notice the small details that have just been etched into this wonderfully purpose-built basilica that is truly, a gem in the Archdiocese of Detroit.
Yeah, it truly is. It's centrally located too in Southeast Michigan, so it's easy accessible to different highways, and it's right off of Woodward, so it's a great place to visit. Daniel, you also penned for New Senior Priest. Life and ministry has brought so many blessings over the years. So tell us about this story.
Yes, we wanted to do a story about senior priests. For those who don't know, most priests upon becoming 70, but could be earlier, they submit their letters of resignation to the Archbishop, and they're granted senior status. Priests don't officially retire. You're a priest now and forever in the Order of Melchizedek, the ordination rite goes. Yeah. However, senior priests, and this year we had 12 priests that were granted senior status, they're no longer in charge of the day-to-day operations of a parish. But yet they still get to be priests just in different ways, whether it's living in Senior Clergy Village in Livonia or with some other priests that they know or somewhere else in the Archdiocese. And kind of they talked, and I was able to interview a few, and they were reflecting on their years of being a pastor of a parish, but now they get to do things like maybe do more hospital visits, maybe do more in-home visits, maybe celebrate Mass up north or, near a family cottage or something. And it's a new way for them to be a priest where they really kind of can go back to the roots of being with the people, being with former parishioners, being with those in need, instead of doing the day-to-day task of making sure bills are paid, the lights stay on, and all the other things that go into being the pastor of a parish full-time.
Mm-hmm. And I recognize one of them, Monsignor Tim Hogan, who I know from St. Fabian. So there's many wonderful senior priests and in our diocese, and it's wonderful that they're still involved, Daniel. You're right. They don't retire from being a priest. They kind of they retire from everyday duties of a church.
Absolutely. And I think, for readers, maybe if they, miss Father Monsignor from a prior assignment, read the story and say, they're still around. They're still, they're still celebrating Mass. They're still living in the sacramental life, but they're just doing this new capacity. And, and priests, they love it when their former parishioners reach out to them. That connection that stays even years, decades later.
That's wonderful. Daniel Malloy here with us. It's First Friday. That means he's keeping us updated on all the wonderful stories they are covering in the Archdiocese of Detroit. And we're moving right along to another story, Viva Cristo Rey, a silent story of faith captives, Hispanic Catholics in Detroit. Tell us about this.
Yes, Mia Largo San Martin. She is a writer for Detroit Catholic's sister publication, Detroit Catholic en Español. But we were able to translate this for our English language readers, such as myself. But it was a conference held at Sacred Heart Major Seminary, going into the history of the Cristero War. The Cristero War was a conflict, a civil war, fought in Mexico between the very secular, atheistic Mexican government at the time and Catholics who refused to abandon their faith even in the midst of pressure of tremendous persecution. It's where the phrase "Viva Cristo Rey," "Long live Christ the King," comes from. And so this conference really delves into this important part of Mexican Catholic history, which later turned into Mexican American Catholic history, and how the first wave of immigration from Mexico to the United States, and to Detroit specifically in the 1920s, were the refugees of this war, of this oppression that the church and the faithful received down in Mexico. And so it was a good chance to sort of reconnect that history, that conflict between 1926 and 1929, to the church today in 2026, and what it means to publicly live as a Catholic, even under whatever scrutiny we may face today.
So, Daniel, how you talked about this being translated from Spanish. How significant is the Hispanic community in the Archdiocese of Detroit area in our region?
Yeah, it's obviously, when in terms of not only in the Archdiocese of Detroit, but throughout the country, the Hispanic Church is the biggest leader of growth in our church, and especially Southwest Detroit and the Downriver area we've seen parishes growing and more vocations coming from the Hispanic community. And that's why about 5 years ago we launched Detroit Catholic en Español, working with a team of translators to translate stories I write in Spanish or stories that Mia Largos writes into English, and just kind of reaching out to the Hispanic community, especially here in Detroit. Like I said, the first wave of Mexican American immigration to Detroit was in the 1920s and 30s. It's a century-old phenomenon. And so we're now only up to, I would say, third and fourth generation Mexican Americans ingrained in the Archdiocese of Detroit. So to say that it's like, oh, this is a new thing, it's not really new. It's just been something that's been part of our DNA as an archdiocese. And as here at Detroit Catholic, it's our mission to reach out to every single Catholic, regardless of language or culture, and being their news source. So it is critical in terms of the mission for the Archdiocese of Detroit to reach out to the Hispanic community.
That's wonderful. So one of my favorite events that I attended this year was Rising from the Ashes revival, calling for Detroit faithful to be people of hope rooted in Christ. You covered this, wonderful pictures. Tell us about your perspective of this beautiful event that I was able to attend as well. And I interviewed several people from that event, so it was beautiful. I loved it.
Absolutely. I mean, 5,200 people were registered for the conference, but so much more just joined for the amazing Eucharistic procession that took place between Huntington Place, that's Cobo Hall, but we have to call it Huntington Place now, from Huntington Place to Spirit Plaza through Campus Marshes, and just fantastic experience. I highly encourage your listeners to go to Detroit Catholic and check out Tim Fuller's amazing photos of the day. Particularly the main photo we have is Archbishop Weisenberger holding out the monstrance, and you can see the Renaissance Center in the background, and it's just an iconic Detroit photo that hopefully will inspire many people to sort of like recommit themselves to a love of Jesus in the Eucharist. But as you said, it was a who's who of great Catholic speakers and musicians. Plenty of your regular guests were there speaking. Father Ricardo, as always, gives just a phenomenal talk. And it was a wonderful day. And the people I spoke to, they were so happy. What I was really surprised about, the 3 people that I kind of interviewed, like man on the street interviews, they're all recent reverts back to the faith. They fell away, and then something was calling into them church around 2021, 2022, and they wanted to go to this to really, really delve deeper into their faith. And it was amazing. It was like 6 people I talked to. They all say, yeah, I left the church, or I grew up going to church and then left the church, and then we came back as a family, and there was just something calling to us. So it was a real sense of revival, and this was something that was drawing people in that have recently been called back to the church. And it was just a very powerful day. And then always, when I'm covering Eucharistic processions, I'm always kind of doing some people watching of people who haven't been at the procession. And I saw many people that were at coffee shops or bars and restaurants, going about their day. And then this procession happens down Woodward Avenue, and the signs of reference they show, that they stop, they put the phones down, they put the fork down, they put their drink down, and they show due reference to our Lord in the Eucharist, just going down the street. And it was just something that was unbelievably needed in Detroit, in Michigan at this time. And I'm not spoiling alert or anything, but I've heard talks that they may want to do this in the future. I'm not going to put Father Joe Horn, Father Malia, who organized. Joe Malia, he was a priest for the Archdiocese of Detroit, organizes. I'm not putting him in a box, but many people came up to me that I spoke to says they would like this to be, if not an annual thing, a semi-annual thing or a regular thing. And all the proceeds, they went to Better Way Detroit, Catholic Charities of Southeast Michigan, Mary's Mantle, the Pope Francis Center, the Capuchin Soup Kitchen. So it was truly just a fantastic day.
It really was. I'm so happy that I was able to attend and interview so many people, and I absolutely loved it and hear so many of the talks. Detroit celebrates the city's patroness, giving God thanks for the faith of St. Anne. You've been busy, Daniel, because you penned this one as well.
Yes, July seems everything that's happening in the church happens in July, late July. But this year, Most Holy Trinity Parish in Corktown hosted the city's celebration of the Feast of St. Anne, patroness of the Archdiocese of Detroit. This year, it was at Most Holy Trinity because, as we already reported, the Basilica of St. Anne is going under just a wonderful and very expansive renovation project. So we went to another historic church, Most Holy Trinity in Corktown, to celebrate the city's patroness. Your listeners are very familiar with the story. When French explorers arrived on the banks of the Detroit River on July 24, 1701, they went about building a fort. And in July, 2 days later, July 26th, the Feast of St. Anne, they built the first St. Anne Church, now the second longest continuing active parish in the United States. And it was just a great chance. Archbishop Weisenberger celebrating Mass at Most Holy Trinity. There was a procession of the statue of St. Anne through the church, and really just a chance for not only parishioners of St. Anne's or parishioners of Most Holy Trinity, but really the entire faithful to connect with our patroness and our heritage as Catholics, and how the devotion of St. Anne began in Brittany in France and moved through the Quebec province and to here in our home state of Michigan, and just kind of how much really reflecting not only on who St. Anne was, the mother of the Blessed Virgin Mary, but also reflecting on the generations of people that have passed down the faith from 1701 to 2026, and how, as Catholics, we're an incarnational people. We believe, God made man in Jesus. And that story was passed through the apostles. It was through their disciples. It was through the saints. It was through our grandparents, our parents, and now us. And I think the Feast of St. Anne really shows that rich history that is just in the soil here in Detroit.
Detroit faithful packed St. Bonaventure Chapel to celebrate Blessed Solanus Casey. I was supposed to be among those people, but it didn't work out. I was really bummed that Ronnie and I got tied up at work and we didn't make it. But Daniel Malloy, tell us about this. I love, one of my favorite places in the AOG is St. Bonaventure, the Blessed Solanus Casey Center. So tell us about this event.
Well, if you were able to make it, you were probably like me and in the hallway or the foyer in between, in between the Solanus Casey Center and St. Bonaventure's. Because when I say packed, I meant packed. But obviously, another blessed event, and providentially, we celebrate the city's patroness, St. Anne, on the same week as we celebrate one of our own, Blessed Solanus Casey. And, it was a chance not only for Mass, but people to pray at the tomb of Solanus Casey and just really reflect on just the impact that Blessed Solanus Casey still has in our archdiocese. And Archbishop Weisenberger was present to celebrate Mass and preach. And, he was kind of reflecting a lot on all the circumstances that formed Blessed Solanus Casey's life, from the faith-rich home that he grew up with on the plains of western Wisconsin, to the Capuchin brothers that he was praying with and living with, and how he impacted them and how they impacted him. And that sense of community really brought about a holiness and a need to serve others. So it was a wonderful, faith-filled day and a great chance to celebrate one of our own.
And keeping you very busy was another wonderful event happening here in Detroit. Cardinal Tobin celebrating 150 years in the city. Local Jesuit community, he wasn't 150 years. Local Jesuit community celebrating 150 years. Cardinal Tobin joined the celebration. Tell us about this.
Yeah, so Cardinal Tobin, a redemptorist from Holy Redeemer in Detroit, was back in his hometown to celebrate the Society of Jesus celebrating 150 years in Detroit. It really was a month full of celebrating anniversaries and milestones. But 150 years ago, the bishop at the time in Detroit wanted a college in the city of Detroit, and so he invited the Society of Jesus over to establish Detroit College, which we now know as the University of Detroit Mercy. And he wanted the Society of Jesus in Detroit so bad that then Bishop Casper H. Borges gifted the Jesuits St. Peter and Paul Cathedral. St. Peter and Paul was the original Detroit Cathedral, and it was gifted to the Jesuits. They still operate the parish and the Pope Francis Warming Center there today, and that's where University of Detroit Mercy started, as Detroit College started. But that's the past, but the Mass and the homily itself was, and the talk Cardinal Tobin gave was about the present and just the work the Society of Jesus is doing throughout the city of Detroit, whether it's UD High, University of Detroit Mercy, the Pope Francis Center, Manresa Retreat House, Loyola High School, and just how much you really cannot tell the history of the church in Detroit without going into the wonderful work and the impact of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits. And so Cardinal Tobin was really reflecting on just how much the Jesuits influenced his own life, even as a redemptorist, and kind of drawing a comparison. Made a funny little click that the Redemptionists are sort of known as the rural Jesuits back in France. I'm not going to repeat it in French because my French is absolutely terrible. But it was a great chance. It was representatives from all the Jesuit ministries in Detroit were there to kind of display a banner during a procession, and just really the Jesuit community together, and the Jesuit related community just celebrating a wonderful night at St. Peter and Paul.
So the last story we want to get to is another one that you penned where Archbishop Weisenberger visited a ministry in Pontiac underserved. So tell us about this.
Yes. So one thing that our Archbishop likes to do is a little bit of pop-ins where he just wants to stop by some various ministries or schools and parishes and just see what's going on. And what he did recently on July 13th was visit Catholic Charities of Southeast Michigan's La Casa Amiga, translated as Friend's House, location in Pontiac. What La Casa Amiga does is it primarily serves as a place for the underserved community throughout Pontiac, not just, but primarily the Hispanic community in terms of getting help with the food pantry, school supplies, any legal work that they need through a legal clinic they operate there, helping navigate benefits and just sort of anything they need with SNAP assistance or just, especially for someone who, if English is their second language, you can imagine how difficult it is filing out paperwork for getting your kids enrolled in school or getting healthcare benefits. And so that's where La Casa Amiga and its staff of 20 provide. And the Archbishop stopped by and he was just checking out the facility and all the work there. And I was able to interview the director, who was very gracious about talking about this sort of surprise visit that the Archbishop kind of prompted. And just it was a chance for her and her team to really show just all the wonderful work they're doing up in Pontiac.
I love it. Daniel Malloy, always a pleasure to have you on First Friday of the Month to give us an overview of all the wonderful stories you're covering in the Archdiocese of Detroit. God bless you and all that you guys do at Detroit Catholic.
God bless you and all you do. And yes, and have a wonderful August.
Great. You too. We'll see you. We'll see you in September.
See you in September. It'll be football season.
Yeah. Are you covering football from a Catholic lens?
We have sports reporters who do that for me. My sports days are over.
Okay. All right. Daniel Malloy with us here, Detroit Catholic. We'll see you in September. Stay with us, everyone. We got to take a break. We'll be right back with more to come after this.